Hey everyone, welcome to GTM Secrets. Stephen Lowisz here. Talk about everything from sales and marketing to RevOps, everything in between, all centered around go-to-market strategies. Today I have Jared Barol, who has, I say this a lot, but an interesting background because we do have some pretty unique people on here. Jared was at Salesforce for a while, Reputation, etc. Jared, as always, I don't want to butcher your background, so mind sharing a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. I started my career as an entrepreneur. So started a few smaller company import export space initially, moved into some work with a VC fund to help launch one of my businesses and moved in
Tech or services?
initially services, importing wine into Eastern Europe, last mile delivery for cheese and so on
Okay.
as well. But then one of our funders, like, we were their only non-tech investment. And so we started doing some consulting work with one of their two of their companies. And then I actually launched a consulting firm that focused on B2B SaaS, go-to-market strategy, and how do you penetrate new markets, and spent on and off almost 10 years helping companies enter secondary, tertiary markets across Europe, Middle East, Latin America, and North America. And so,
Interesting.
yeah. And so that was a lot of fun, tremendous time. And then moved to the Bay Area, moved to the Bay Area back from Europe a few years ago and to work for Salesforce. I was in pre-sales initially, and then moved into a corporate strategy and operations function, supporting product and go-to-market for the industries operating. And then for the last 2 years across private equity firms and portfolio companies, helping to restructure.
I'm very familiar with Salesforce, but what specifically is Salesforce Industries?
Yeah, so you've probably heard of, if you've been to Dreamforce or seen the ads anywhere, financial services cloud, health
Yeah,
cloud, energy utilities cloud, all of those industry-specific clouds, they
got
rolled up through a single operating unit.
got it. So you manage the go-to-market specifically for those.
Yeah, think of it as, where do we play? How do we win? And so that was what my team answered the question for. So setting up structures on how we think about what capabilities for our customers are we supporting, and how do we get the sales teams and the field teams to better sell and talk to those capabilities. And then if we think about what should we be building next, where's their TAM, where's their opportunity, and how do we identify that, like, the least conflicting path to get to that opportunity.
Well, in case you're bashful, I see stats that you have. So $4 billion operating unit, decreased time to sell by 20%, increase ACV by 100% across 33 different product lines. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves, man. That's pretty awesome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. It was a great time, and totally was not just me. I have an amazing team, and the peers were phenomenal as well.
So let's start here. I've talked to a lot of executives from big companies like Google, Microsoft, etc. Some are really good at innovating, some are not. Without, of course, I don't want to talk bad about Salesforce. I love Salesforce. I just signed a 5-year contract with Salesforce. How do they approach innovation? They obviously just came out with their new agents, whatever, agents, I guess is what they're calling them. That seems innovative. What did you see going on there?
Yeah, I think there's separate up product and go to market. And an answer to that question, the product side, some of the most brilliant people in the country the world work there. I spent a lot of time working with the Futures Lab and the Futures teams and Stereo teams there as well, who their job is to identify the future and then make it happen. It's a really interesting work. And so how do you be innovative? Well, you bring the future to today. You identify where the world's going to go in an industry, in a sector, in a space, and then you build for that ahead of your competitors and faster and more purpose. So the product side, very innovative, seen a lot of great work. The go-to-market side, it's hard to innovate go-to-market as a large company.
Fair.
And so if you look at the Microsofts, the Salesforces, the Oracles, and when you start getting up their employee count, any innovation, and let's just define the word innovation. Innovation means you're doing something new. You're trying something, you're testing something, you pick a subset of what you tested that you like, and you're going to try and make that bigger and deploy that more broadly. So that's one thing when you have 50 sellers. When you have 100,000 employees or 50,000 sellers, it's a very different world, and the change management costs goes up exponentially at that point as well. And so innovating and go-to-market for large enterprises is not done often. Now, Snowflake's done some really interesting work and to kind of change the game in a couple of spaces, mostly around how they leverage data and go-to-market. Databricks, same thing. But they're newer and they don't have that many employees yet. They're still, we think of them as large companies, but they're not, comparatively. So the go-to-market side of Salesforce, I think what they did well, I don't know if I'd call it innovative, and maybe I'm wrong, is they surround the customer. And, from the full sales cycle is mapped. Anytime anything new is deployed, who executes what, where, at which stage in the sales cycle, and that is drilled out deeply across every team.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see that in a lot of companies. When you think of, for example, if I'm thinking of like a 500-person software company, and you're going to set up you have 7 SEs, maybe supporting 50 sellers or something like that, you're probably not having a stage-based approach for what the SEs are delivering, and then you're not building out product marketing for each of the buyer journeys because you don't have the time or the bodies to do this. And so Salesforce did very well with doing that. All of the assets, all of the time for everything.
I like that you distinguish product innovation different than GTM. I mean, a lot of my clients are mid-market B2B SaaS, right? Kind of reputation type of environments, but they do look at product as innovation, and then they think that it's going to sell itself because it's sexy. So yeah. I like that you made that distinguishment. I think that's the word. So I like that a lot. Now, I imagine that you learned a lot at Salesforce. I mean, you were not entry level at Salesforce. You ran a massive business unit, or at least the go-to-market for it. What did you learn from that you took to reputation, which for people that don't know is essentially just what the name is: reputation management, social management, etc.
Yeah. So I ran the team that was responsible for the building out the strategies and helping to execute it. I didn't know, the salespeople at Salesforce for Salesforce Industries are phenomenal, really amazing leaders, rolling all the way up to Mark. And so I can't take credit for what they did. One thing but to answer your question directly, coming into a company like Reputation, smaller, maybe more nascent from a perspective of maturity models and go-to-market, maturity models and product, maturity models in general, how they look at their industry. So, and also about the industry, it's a more nascent industry. It's very fragmented. You look around, there's a handful of public companies, but no real large market caps. Majority of the companies in the space are roughly around the same age, roughly around the same revenue, and no real disruption in there. And so what I'd like to think about in the scenario like that is, what can we do to optimize our performance today with the market that we have, and then start thinking about like easy, what are the easiest things that we can do? Start having expansion on our base. And so, there's a couple plays you can roll. One of them is cost reduction, optimization, and reinvestment. Another one is kind of the inverse of that, which is maybe you have a very solid product and your go-to-market metrics are impressive, and you start looking at how can we take out particular competitors, and so you start running competitor takeout campaigns. But again, like, this is because there's a finite number of competitors. You can count them on 2 hands probably globally.
Well, hold on right there, if you don't mind. Describe a takeout campaign.
I mean, this is something that product marketing typically would own, so I'm going to butcher this. And then, product marketers listening to this are probably going to, leave comments, but I'll do my best. What we'll do is identify how. Okay, so HubSpot wanted to go after Salesforce, 2 massive giants.
They're trying.
They're trying, and they're not doing a bad job. They're growing.
They've taken more market share, but they now match Salesforce in pricing, which I have a gripe with.
It doesn't work if it's not broke. Don't. Yeah. So what they do is they look at customer bases, they look at the use cases Salesforce is selling for, and they come up with ways to attack the same customer bases. Now, that's at a very high level. You see Gong doing this against Clary, for example, in the smaller company scale, where they identify who are Clary current and former customers, and then they understand they research use cases, and they pitch similar use cases at maybe lower price points with faster, easier implementation. Like the most expensive part of most tech adoption is the implementation and maintenance, and not the actual technology. So one thing that when you're doing custom competitor takeouts is you try and eliminate that. That's probably the biggest obstacle you're gonna have. Now, again, like I don't think this is true for every company all the time, everywhere, but we've seen that work pretty well. And so, moving on from the competitor takeout part, another play you can run are roll-ups. If you're entering a market that has a lot of small players and you've achieved some level of advantage, starting to take out your competitors through acquisition is another way you can take this. And it's more expensive, faster, and look, and most M&A is non-accretive. I think that's an unfortunate fact. It's a very not sexy fact, but it is the way you can start capturing more of a market by eliminating others who will be innovating and disrupting you. And I mean, we Salesforce did that too.
So at Salesforce, you have as much brand equity as any company possibly could, right? I mean, maybe Google, right? But you're up there.
Sure.
Reputation, there's 1,000 companies trying to eat your lunch.
Yeah.
And I realize, correct me if I'm wrong, reputation focused mostly on enterprise or at least mid-market and up, whereas Hootsuite is $40 or whatever the heck it is for, a solopreneur, if you will. But there's others in the space. How did your GTM go to market differ from some of the others in the space, specifically when you did not have the same level of brand equity that you did when you were at Salesforce?
So I wouldn't say that we competed so much with Hootsuite, for example. And let me explain what I mean by this. I think it's actually a really interesting point. So, I'll start by saying what I think is going to be a theme in the next 2 years is that we're entering an era of platforms and consolidation.
Yep.
So there are a lot of niche players who may do social or may do review management or, chunks of this, parts of this, niche aspects. And they'll sell to the same customers as reputation might, or competitor reputation might. But when they look at it, when the customer is looking at their overall spend, not just across vendors, but across teams that support the vendors, what they're looking at today, I would believe, and I would bet, is how can I reduce the amount of hours my team is spending administrating these various tools, reduce my, the effective cost of my vendor set. Speaking with a head of business technology at a really rapidly growing mid-stage company yesterday. This was the conversation. He's trying to rationalize across the entire biz tech space. And so we have these niche, I don't mean to call it Hootsuite niche, but it is niche in some ways, providers. And I think that you're going to see them competing less and less with platforms. And in fact, from a competitive perspective, without sharing too much, the companies that we competed with at Rep were other larger platforms. And so how do you compete against platforms is a different approach. And there's innovation on the edges is one way. Everyone maybe shares a core set of fundamental capabilities and product sets, and it's to identify what the same customers want that we're not doing today. So what can we add on to that list? What other sets of customers and types of customers are there that maybe we're not selling to that we are already a fit? So not changing the product, just changing the ICP and targeting. And then what the net new, kind of a new one, both of those. New markets, new product lines, and so on.
So what I'm hearing is, which Salesforce does very well, is create more of an ecosystem of products, horizontal integration.
Yep.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yep, absolutely. I think we're going to see a lot of that across all SaaS in the next 2 years.
So we did not discuss this, but maybe you have some insight. Think about, you've run your own startups before, right? startups can't afford massive amounts of horizontal integration, and they certainly can't afford M&A. No chance in hell. How should a startup balance doing what you're good at and being the best at it versus horizontal integration, feature additions, etc.?
Oh, I think you just said it. Focus. You have to focus. I've seen too often startups, small companies in general, try to do too many things for too many companies. There's a company I've been talking to that I don't want to give too much about this one. So no, they typically sell into a vertical SaaS space and into one particular vertical, and they just found had two financial services companies reach out asking for support. So now they're selling to these two financial services companies. And, the caution I have is before expanding your ICP, make sure it's actually a fit. Because if you only have 5 sellers, 1 seller, if you're under 3 million in revenue, the founder's doing all the sales, you have a talk track, you understand your buyer in a given market, and you believe that's a fit, then keep pushing at it. You will not have enough mass to prove or disprove your theory unless you spend the time and focus.
Makes sense. Now, at what point are you able to start opening up? Is it based on your cash flow and capacity? Is it based on take 10% of market share and then flip the bird to your competitors and start branching out? What's the idea behind that?
I think that very few companies are going to go from 0 to 10% of market share, ever in their futures. And so I would think of this more as, when you have a repeatable motion, invest in that repeatable motion. When you pick that motion, so let's call it an ICP, because it is an ICP, and then how you go to market against that ICP. Then the question is, who else? What are similar ICPs to this one that I can copy paste this motion against? You already understand it. You understand your unit economics, mm-hmm. and you know how to just roll out another team. Now let's focus on a slightly different set of messaging. Or maybe it's not another team. It's just a single territory in the same team. And you test the next one. I'm not a fan of hyper-verticalizing early. I think that is something that's something that has a lot of value later, but is not an optimal path for earlier stage companies. And so, having a territory, a rep who focuses on financial services is one thing. Setting up a whole financial services team with a different set of roll-ups is a separate thing. And so I like the iterative approach. You're going to have inbound, you're going to have accidental customers, and that might also guide you. So, for example, if you see that you have pull coming from a geography or a particular type of customer, and it's enough pull that you can start drawing some signals, well, figure out who the lookalike audiences are for that customer and start going after them.
I like it. To your point, again, I just love Salesforce, plus you can relate. What I'm hearing is, if you didn't have Sales Cloud dominate for decades, Financial Services Cloud is pointless.
For example, yeah. That's a good example. I mean, the Sales and Service Cloud might be a slightly better analogy, and Service is better. It's a larger cloud, more revenue, for example, right? But that combination together is incredible. Individually, you're a niche, you're a Zendesk, or you're so on. Which is
now,
great.
When it comes to top of funnel demand gen, which is a good chunk of go-to-market, certainly not all of it, but it's a good chunk. And I think right now it's one of the hardest areas. You have inbound-led, product-led, outbound-led, sales-led, founder-led. I put up a post the other day that I'm tired of everything being called a lead, right? Then you have ABM, etc. There's no magical answer, and I'm sure you'll reaffirm that. But how do you even start to put together, this should be my GTM strategy? It's ABM versus persona-based, whatever.
I'm biased. I think ABM is the only approach this today that matters for most companies, not for everyone. For most companies in SaaS, it's here's the problem: share of wallet is decreasing for everyone because of fragmentation, because of just the amount of competition you have. I'm not even looking at the macroeconomic reality, which probably is also worth talking about. And so if you are going to start blasting a territory, when your territory now is, anyone in the San Francisco Bay Area who has 5 or more employees, you're going to waste a lot of time and money on your reps because your win rates are going to be low, your conversion rates are going to be low, and you know that going into it, and you expect that. The problem is you are wasting time because your competitors aren't wasting that time. Your competitors have determined that, they want to talk to 50 to 100 person businesses that are, owned by the initial founder still, that have a light adoption of sales and marketing tech. And of that, there's 100, 500 companies that maybe might be a fit, not the 10,000 that you initially get one out. And so they can invest the same amount of money that you're investing in 10,000 customers, they're investing in going after 500. And so let's say it's $10,000, well, you're spending $1 per customer and your competitor is spending what, 20? So they're going to outspend you. They're going to win those customers generally. And they're going to do it faster because you could also only go through 10,000 customers so fast to process it. Whereas a smaller number wins. I'm very bullish on ABM generally. Sorry, you go.
Like how you framed it. The adage is whoever spends the most will win. And that's probably true to a certain extent. It is true, but it's how much are you going to spend for a specific client, not how much are you going to spend overall, to your point. How do you use that 10 grand? I haven't heard it framed like that, but that's very, very interesting.
And look, it's kind of flippant also, and there's a billion exceptions to that. And I don't mean to say that's the one size fits all for everybody. I think that, however, I would think that going after a properly segmented ICP should be the first step. Well, once you're getting to the end of your founder-led sales motion, you should be figuring out how to move efficiently.
Now, I want to go back to something that you said earlier, the difference between product innovation and GTM innovation. I like that. Now, at a mid-sized company like a Rep or an enterprise company like a Salesforce, there's going to be different, I think we were talking about this before, different levels of change management to foster innovation. Okay, what does that look like from an enterprise level down to mid-market? How do you foster and enforce innovation?
Yeah. Let's talk about change management first, and let's talk about innovation second. So where is change management typically run? Well, what I've seen, there's a couple of answers to the question. Most common answer is through enablement. Now, there might be a change management function in your business, depending on how much change you're expecting in the next period of time. But typically, enablement is as the guiding factor for this. And then it's executed by the frontline leaders. And so how do you foster a culture of innovation? It comes through having the right enablement people, the right strategy, a roadmap that is consistent and does not change frequently. And it comes to having the right first line leaders and the right sales leaders and the right marketing leaders who get the intent. If you are trying to change how your business is functioning and your frontline sales leaders disagree and will not cooperate, you will not be successful. And so fostering a culture of innovation, I think, is about training. It's about managing metrics, performance metrics for the business, and identifying those who are not willing to innovate with you.
Makes sense. Okay. How does that change, though? So enterprise org, Salesforce, you have change management, you have awesome sales enablement, I assume, making assumptions here. They likely, correct me if I'm wrong, have it down to a science. If we're going to roll out X, here's what we need to do to get adoption of our own team. Therefore, they can translate that to get adoption from end users. One of the issues with mid-market is that you have to make sure that you're continuing that growth curve, that hockey stick growth curve that all their investors want, or PE, whatever, what they're looking for, and stabilize the ship. But you also need innovation. How do you balance those two things?
Yeah. Like, I think one of the most commonly underinvested areas in the go-to-market stack is enablement. I see this all over the place. So one of the first one of the first things to go and budgets start getting cut. And I think that's a mistake. It is the reason it goes first. It's hard to attach revenue to it.
It is.
What is the impact of it? The problem is this, that if you eliminate or understaff it, your onboarding times will be slower. You'll have a lower success rate for new reps. Existing reps will not be, any change management you run out will be run purely through the first line leadership, who are not being enabled themselves generally. I've not seen this be successful in companies where they're when there's like a 1 to 15, 1 to 30, 1 to 90 ratio. The higher that ratio goes, enablement to customer enablement, the less successful it is. And I was talking with someone at a dinner a week ago, and she has a 15-person enablement work for a 500-person sales team. That sounds awesome, frankly. It sounds great. I have not seen that before. Like, small mid-sized companies, it's really common. Is like one person, or maybe, or call it 70 sellers and customer experience, an additional 70 CS people. There's no way you can be successful at that.
So you mentioned something key, and I've had this conversation a few times on this podcast around attributing revenue to like rev ops or marketing ops, sales ops, etc. Right? What are the KPIs that you do hold sales enablement to? Because they're not interfacing with customers. Is it user adoption, and then you insinuate more user adoption of your team? I mean, ends in, like I said, end user, end client adoption. Is that what you're measuring, or are there other KPIs that you care about just as much or more?
So it depends on what type of enablement we're talking about. So enablement comes in a lot of different flavors. There is onboarding enablement, in which case, time to ramp, for example, for reps is a key, is a main number I would be using. And there's a few others. Compliance, utilization of decks and content, which you can track through Gong or Atrium or your performance platform. If we're talking about skill sets, then it's adoption. There's another one. One other thing that you can do is, for example, we identified at a previous company that our cross-sell was low. Right. And so we wanted to increase that. So the plan was to have enablement build out content and then measure success on the teams that were enabled based on the next quarter's cross-sell rates. If you executed the enablement and the enablement had an impact, then the cross-sell rate should improve. It should be cut and dry. So like picking those specific types of enablement structures against things that you can track in your CRM is something I really recommend the companies do. Salesforce, we would do that all the time as well.
Isn't there though? So you get the argument between marketing and sales and orgs that don't have one revenue function, right? Marketing brings in leads. Sales says these are crap leads. That's why I missed my quota, etc. Aren't you going to run into the same issue with sales enablement where they say, hey, I taught this, the living hell out of this. Sales just sucks at selling, or this product actually sucks that you just put out. And aren't you going to find conflict between those two if you don't see that increase in cross-sell, just as an example?
Sure, you might. I'd say also look at the data. Is it every rep was trained, every rep failed, no one was successful? Or is it these two teams were trained, team A, 85% of people saw an improvement, team B, 30% of people saw an improvement. Why is there a disparity? And start drilling in. You might find other answers to that question too. Maybe it's the leader on those teams as well. Maybe it's something. Maybe it could be person who was teaching was sick on the second day and they actually only did half the. There could be reasons for it. I think you have to do it in ways that you can do comparative tests. You can't just do one for one and call it a day and then wait and see if it was successful. You have to do 2 teams and see what happens.
Last question for you. At what size, and again, I know it's going to vary and you probably don't want to answer, but at what size should a startup or SMB invest in their first sales enablement hire?
Totally varies. You're right. I think that when you start hitting that 15 to 20 sales reps area, you should have an enablement person.
2-3 sales managers, throwing an enablement person in there.
Yes. Because
Makes
then
sense.
you're also hitting the scale where the CRO and the marketing team and PMMs, you cannot build the content for that many people across this many different time zones. I'd expect by that point to have multiple different products being trained on and having different approaches being trained. And so you need to start having specialization, because you're going to be taking too much time away from the core actors' roles for those functions to then have them go and teach it as well. And you need to create that next new capability for your business.
Makes sense. Well, Jared, this is awesome. I appreciate it. Now, everyone says LinkedIn. I'm sure you will as well, but where's the best place for people to connect with you?
LinkedIn, please do.
Awesome. Really appreciate it, man. Thanks so much for hopping on.
Thank you very much. You have a great rest of your day.